All right, guys. Thanks for joining us again. In being in the business from last 8 years, I have come across with multiple times people asking me, especially the landlords or the homeowners, why the rules are towards tenants too much evolved. In senses like why it is being so much favorable. Nothing against the tenants. I'm just giving a neutral opinion about his. Yes, they are. But before I dive into much, I have a guest here who specializes in this tenancy issues, and he's a lawyer by profession. Anil Agarwal. Thank you, Anil, for coming to our podcast.
Thanks, Jas. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you, and I appreciate it. It's a long drive for you, coming all the way from Vancouver to
Yeah,
White Rock.
not bad.
But no, thank you, and giving us. It's my pleasure to introduce you because a lot of people, as I said it in the intro, has asked, and I also sometimes feel like why this is being so complicated when we are dealing, especially in the residential business of tenancies.
Yeah.
So many issues. So I thought, okay, let me take this opportunity and invite Anil because you are a professional in this. And until you brought this to my attention that you specialize it, I always thought, okay, lawyers, there's no such thing for tenancy as a lawyer specializing in it. So
Yeah, I will say that I practice in tenancy.
yes,
I hate to use the word specialized, but I practice in tenancy
Okay.
and strata, right?
Right.
So strata buildings, like the one we're in today.
yes,
And I guess when you work at a firm like mine, where we
Yeah.
have about 100 lawyers, offices across Canada,
right,
you have pockets of practitioners who do certain types of law.
yes,
It just so happens that in my group, we have
Yep.
5 lawyers who practice tenancy and strata condominium work. And so by focusing on it, we're able to provide, our clients
Yeah.
with, services that really meet their niche needs
Right.
for residential tenancy matters.
So before we dive into it and
Yeah.
deep in it, I would love to have your intro also, like how you become a lawyer, because I know you off the cameras you shared that you have wearing a couple of hats. So could you please tell briefly from where you started
Yeah.
becoming a lawyer then?
Sure. It all started when I worked for the government.
Okay.
And that was about 2005. I worked as a border officer at the Vancouver airport. Great job, fun job. But the problem you find, or I found with the government is, there's a really hard ceiling.
Yeah.
And if you want to hustle, if you have that desire to hustle,
Right.
it becomes really hard to exist in a place
Yes.
where moving up is sometimes very hard.
Yeah.
And so, fair enough, government gave me an option.
Okay.
And I like taking risks sometimes.
Okay.
And I've always wanted to go to law school. And it was a great way for me to transition my skills.
Sorry, you go back to
Yeah.
it. So how old you were that time when 2005 you were doing the CBSA?
I was about 28, 20. So I was about 28, 29 when I said, I'm going to go back.
So
then-
at the close to 30 years
Yeah.
or age, you thought, okay, I'm going to go back to the school and do law.
Yep.
And did you think about this law all of a sudden, or was it in
No,
was in mind?
it was
back of
always,
your mind?
always back of my mind. And sometimes life takes a
Yes.
different course,
Yeah.
right? And I fell into a good job with the government, a comfortable job.
Right.
But sometimes comfortable is not your friend.
Yes.
And comfortable doesn't allow you to, realize your potential.
Yeah, exactly. You get
Yeah.
into a bubble, like a
Yeah.
comfort zone. You are so
100%.
your growth
Yeah.
doesn't. It comes to a point where you feel like, okay, now
Exactly.
the growth is saturated.
Exactly. And the pension is nice.
Yes.
But if that's what you're working for, it's either you want the pension or you want life. What do you
Yes.
want? But I also like learning.
Yeah.
So I'm a life student. Like I just like to learn.
Right.
And so I also like, and this is the most important thing for me, is I like opening doors.
Mm.
And by having a law degree, I believed, and I now confirmed that it opens so many doors for you. Right?
Yes.
Like we're here talking
Yes.
today.
Yes.
Right? It's an avenue to connect with people. Everybody wants advice.
Yes.
Right? Believe it or not. But it opens so many doors in so many areas where you never thought possible.
Yeah.
Right? And I love opportunities.
No, great.
And so it's what you make of it.
Yes.
And so that's what, a driving force for me.
No, amazing, because it's being at the age of close to 30 years old and then thinking, okay, let me pretty much is kind of starting from the scratch.
Yeah.
Quitting the job, a government job, which is most of the people won't do that
Yeah.
or won't take a risk. So
Sure.
you were taking that is amazing. And that's why you were being successful where you are, because you took that stride in it. Okay, I'm going to do it. But further to that is once you pass your law, so how you thought, okay, you're going to be doing the practice only into residential, or just was
So
something planned out for this?
I will start off and say nobody ever goes into law school thinking,
Yes.
I'm going to be a tenancy lawyer.
Okay.
Number one. I did think that because I had this previous customs immigration experience, I could be an immigration lawyer.
Yes.
It's natural.
I was going to say that. Mostly it would be the natural thing is
It's
immigration lawyer.
It's natural, right? But the immigration law industry is it's interesting. If you're in Canada, you don't have connections abroad, or you don't have a presence abroad.
Yes.
And that's where all the immigrants are trying to get here.
Right.
So it's sometimes a hard one to build.
Right.
And depending on how you want to do it, it takes a longer period of time.
Yes.
But I got to my law firm, Alexander Holburn, fantastic law firm, for my opinion, but I'm just
Yes.
biased, right? But I get there.
And you, from the beginning, you're with the same law
yeah,
firm.
from
And-
this law firm through and through.
Nice. Okay.
I think one of the hardest things in life to find is good people,
Yes.
and I found good people where I am,
Amazing.
and that makes me happy where I am.
That's good.
Right?
Amazing.
And so I'm at this law firm, and so the first thing after law school is you article,
Yes.
right? You graduate, you have to article for about 10 months.
Yeah, like it's in the simple language for the viewers maybe
Yep.
not understanding.
Sure.
It's as like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's like an internship. You have to do it.
Yeah,
or
a
kind of
practicum, internship, right? You do 10 months,
months, and then you have to
write your
exam.
Yeah, exams, and then you get certified.
Yes.
And so when you're in that 10-month period, you get exposed to a lot of areas of law.
Correct.
And so that through that process, I really got along well with the partner. The partner I work with, Lisa,
Okay.
and she is fantastic tenancy lawyer, just superb. But she's also close in age to me, and so we can relate to each other.
Right.
We have similar ethics and drive to grow
Okay.
a practice and to be good at what we do. And so we just got along so well, and I like working with her. It just became a natural fit. She needed
Right.
somebody to work with her, and I was there to work with her.
Amazing. No, that's good to know it. So you being a CBSA officer, then you get into law.
Yep.
And I know you mentioned that you are now professor also.
Yeah, so I'm a visiting
And-
professor at Simon Fraser University.
Simon Fraser. Amazing. Okay.
And so-
what you teach there, like,
So they have a program for those people who want to become notary publics.
okay.
So what I do is I teach the advanced property law course for those individuals who want that designation. So it's still law related,
Nice.
and I'm helping those who want to get into legal practice in a different way.
Yes.
To achieve that goal.
Goal. No, that's amazing. That's amazing. So now coming to the main reason why I invited you here, and I wanted to know the people also. First impression, always we get it. And I'm also including myself in when I say we, being a realtor too. Why do we need a lawyer for tenancy? Because there's an RTB, you go through the paperwork, give the eviction notice to the tenant if they're not paying the rent. So why we need you for the lawyers for us?
I think sometimes we try to oversimplify the task.
Yeah.
You're right. It could be as simple as I'm going to issue the notice. They may accept it. They may dispute it. And if they dispute it, you go to a hearing. You give your submission to the arbitrator at the
Yes.
RTB, and they make a decision. Seems straightforward. However, I think you realize this, and I think all your viewers are going to realize
Yeah.
this. Increasingly, the law is changing. It is, on its face, appearing more tenant-friendly.
Yeah.
They're getting more rights. And as a result, to be best prepared, to understand how to navigate the system, because the RTB is just one part of it.
Right.
Remember, even if you win as a landlord, they can apply to the court,
Yeah.
and the court can look at that decision from the RTB and say, was that a reasonable or a patently reasonable decision? Okay?
Okay.
And so then if the court disagrees with the RTB, well, guess what? They overturn the decision. They remit it back to the RTB for another hearing. And so sometimes it's not so cut and dry as simply one
Okay.
decision.
So is it we can bypass the RTB and go to the court directly, or no? It has to go through the RTB as the decision maker.
Yeah, so for most issues, I would
Yes.
say that the RTB is the primary decision maker. They have that jurisdiction to deal with things underneath their umbrella.
Okay.
Right? So, for example, notices to end tenancy, whether it's 1 month for cause,
Yes.
2 months for landlord's use, or if you want to undertake significant renovations, you need the 4-month notice,
Yes.
right? But each one of those has its intricacies.
Yes.
So the landlord says, the normal scenario I get is landlord says, my son is going to move into the unit. On paper, fine,
Yes.
right? My son's going to move into the unit. Well, the son leaves the unit after 5 months.
Right.
Well, guess what happens now? Because tenants are watching what landlords are doing. And once they see that it's not occupied for that 6 months, or there's a different use, perhaps they sell it in 6 months.
Yeah.
Well, now you have a potential penalty of 12 months compensation for the rent to
Yes.
that tenant.
Yeah. There's a rule in
Right.
it.
So
Yes.
they're getting more crafty.
Yes.
And I want to to your comment earlier. this is not anti-tenant. I want to be very clear. You know, the reason why laws have developed as they are is because some landlords took liberties,
Yeah.
and the law is reactionary generally.
Yeah.
And the law said, well, we got to protect tenants a little bit
Tenants,
more.
yes.
And so it's uncomfortable, but we got here through a reason. It just didn't happen.
Yes.
Right? But in order to ensure that you have the best strategy, and the strategy can't be narrow, the strategy has to be, well, you know, when I look at a file, I say this. We're going to go to a hearing. But when I prepare that package
Yes.
for the RTB and when I present it, my mindset is, if it goes to a court tomorrow,
Right.
what will the judge say? And so we design the strategy so that if it goes to a judge, it is our hope that the judge is going to say, good outcome.
So as a landlord, when they should involve the lawyer right from the beginning when they want to give the eviction notice, or it should be if the tenant is not moving out? What stage mostly you look at the clients of yours come to you, or what should be a person should
You know,
do it?
They come at all different points of time.
Yes.
I think depending on how sophisticated the client is, some will recognize very early. You know, the
Right.
ones perhaps who have done this a little bit more often will say, you know what, at the outset, we're going to get a lawyer involved.
Okay.
Some of those who perhaps one property, first time person, they're going to try to do it themselves, right? And then you have the people who don't care.
Yes.
They're going to go through the whole process. They're probably going to lose at the RTB,
Yeah.
and then they come to you after everything's done and say, what do I do now?
Yes.
And so I think and I'll say this as well, lawyers aren't cheap, right?
Yes.
They cost money,
Yeah.
and I'm very alert to that. And so I don't want people to spend more money than they have or
Right.
than they need to spend.
Need to do.
The problem I find is by the time if you have a third person who's waited till the very end and has got a bad decision and they try to fix it, it costs more money to fix a problem
Then
than to do it from the outside.
because you're not getting the 10 to. And I agree, the lawyers are not cheap, but if you're looking at the bigger picture of it, actually it's better to hire a lawyer in the beginning of it. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, I will share one story before that also. There's so many of my clients who are investors because
Sure.
investor is my niche.
Sure.
Yeah. Commercial is different.
Yep.
Residential is completely different ballgame, and that's one of the main reason also I tell people if you can afford buy commercial,
Yeah.
because commercial there's different rules for
Yep,
it.
yep.
This is the only reason is I'm not saying it again. At one point in time, I was also a tenant.
Sure.
But it's not. I'm not putting all the tenants into one same frame and saying that you all are doing the same thing. You're misusing the rules and regulations because they are favoring you.
Sure.
But there are some people who are misusing it.
100%.
Okay. For example, I'll tell you. I can't say before my client, but
Sure.
I'll tell you my own story.
Sure.
Have a property in Langley.
Sure.
As you mentioned, and I was laughing when you mentioned that okay, second time you go to the lawyer. I lease out the place to a tenant, did all the checks, everything good, okay, self-employed, paid me the rent,
Yep.
and for 1 month, after that, he never paid me.
Okay.
He stayed there for 3-4 months. Being myself busy too with my own profession, so I didn't have the time to go. I was not on top of it. When he delayed the rent,
Yep.
he was making excuses. I will give it to you. Long story short, I put up a notice there, and I've said that okay because I read the rules, 10-day notice,
Sure.
and the tenant will move out.
Yep.
He didn't.
Oh.
So then I have to go to the RTB.
Right.
RTB look at all the documents. First of all, those documents are not easy to fill it up. It takes specialized. It's not that easy as it looks like. Okay,
Right.
you can fill those forms.
Right.
If you are not a busy professional, then it's a different thing. I
Sure.
feel like.
Yep.
My challenge was that to go through all those documents, and even in one mistake, you do it in the filling of the document or
Correct.
not providing the right proof.
Right.
They said your application is declined.
Correct.
And then they took a court date. The court date comes in
Yep.
after. So I filed the application in January last year, 2023.
Sure.
My court date came in June 2023.
Right.
So I called the RTB saying that I'm not getting the mortgage
Yep.
paid.
Yep.
This guy owes $4,000 every month. It's going to be carrying the cost for 6 months. They
Yeah.
said we are helpless. Long story short, nothing happened.
Yeah.
Then my date comes in. This is the interesting part, how the rules are so much lean towards the tenancy.
Sure.
I'm on the phone with the arbitrator and there was a time lock. Okay, if you don't reach out in 2-3 minutes, it's going to go to the either party's favor. So there was
Yeah.
no show for the 3 minutes.
Yep.
Arbitrator said, okay, we're going to be favoring in your issue. We will be giving the eviction notice. After 5 minutes on the phone,
Jumps
all
on.
of a sudden somebody comes in.
Sure.
And I told arbitrator, why are you allowing this person to come in now? He said, no, hang on a minute. Let me talk to him. He's not the same tenant who I rented the property.
Oh wow. Okay.
He already moved out.
Okay.
ABC moved, A moved, brought B.
Yeah.
B saying, I'm the tenant.
Yeah.
And I even don't know who's Jas is. Okay, because
Wow.
for me,
Yeah.
A is the landlord and he's
Yeah.
taking the rent from me.
Right.
So this is how they use it. He was just lying.
Yeah.
He know it, what he's doing it.
Okay.
So now the arbitrator said, okay, your file is declined, Mr. Oberoi, because there's a wrong tenant name. You have not, this is the new tenant. Either you mitigate the whatever the issue is among yourself, expenses, whatever is, figure it out, or reapply it for the eviction notice again.
Right.
I literally had to be an argument with her. Said, how this is fair to me? My house, somebody else is staying it. He's not even a tenancy in there. She didn't listen. She sent me an email saying, I'm gonna sending you the note, the decision.
Right.
Sends me, reapply it.
Yeah.
So what I thought it, okay, took me already 6 months.
Sure.
Let me go to the tenant, being a nice landlord, saying,
Yeah.
okay, let's figure this out.
Sure.
I went to him. He said, okay. Oh, I didn't know A rented. I thought he's the owner. I said, forget about it. I'm the owner now. I'm renting this house to you for $4,000. You seems to be a nice tenant. I'll give you a discount, but please make my rent on time.
Right.
I give you $3,500.
Right.
No security deposit, no damage deposit because you're already living in the house.
Yep.
But please keep giving.
Here.
Done. All the formalities been done. He doesn't pay me the rent for next 3 months.
Okay.
Then I hired a lawyer.
Right.
I said, okay, I don't have a time to go to the RTB again, the documents and everything, so I'm going to hire the lawyer. When finally the lawyer got hired, he got the eviction done. Just 2 days before the eviction. I'm not saying again who did that. House got burnt.
Oh wow.
And
Wow.
it's still under the investigation who burnt it. Insurance company investigating me.
Right.
All those hassle.
Right.
And I have picture IDs of the tenant too.
Sure.
Nobody's calling them. I don't know. They're saying he's not answering the phone.
Wow.
So all the harassment I'm going through, it's been more than a year.
Yeah.
I lost $50,000 as a rent
Yeah.
and paid the lawyer
Sure.
on top of it.
Right.
And now it is what we are in. So this was done during Christmas last year, 2023.
Okay.
So we are in March.
Yeah.
Still, nothing has been concluded from the insurance. They're still doing investigation who has burned the house.
And you're out
So
of pocket.
Everything is out of the pocket. And I've felt the heat of it, and I find, okay, we needed lawyers from the first beginning of it. That's why when we were talking, I said, yes, I
Yeah.
wanted to educate the
Well,
people too.
And it's interesting, right? So when you talk about that first hearing where this new party comes up,
Yeah.
well, then the issue is, well, is it an assignment? Are they a subtenant? And these are kind of these are the key words that will resonate. That when the arbitrator hears these words, it's going to make sense to them. And so
Yes.
you can make arguments at the time, and it'll be easier for a lawyer, right?
Yeah, because you're talking a legal language.
Yeah,
I don't know
Yeah,
about it, so
exactly.
they catch me with the words. Oh,
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah, it's funny, like I have my father-in-law, great guy, right? And he's a really, he used to be a machinist and he likes to do a lot of things with his hands. That's not who I am,
Yes.
right? Like I wouldn't tell somebody, to fight your own lawsuit if they're not a lawyer,
yes.
right? Same way as if I have an appliance that needs to be fixed, I'm not going to ruin the appliance. I'm just going to hire somebody who knows what they're doing,
Yeah.
because that person has liability insurance. There's a lot of things that go with that. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of expertise, but there's also insurance, and there's a lot of things that benefit you by
Yes.
going with a professional. In your scenario, I'd also tell you different things. For example, when they're not paying you, how are you issuing notices to them? Are you telling them that they have to pay you within a few days, or you're going to, there are steps to be taken, because, although they're not paying you rent today, they could start paying you rent again.
Right.
And, it's not only about failure to pay rent. If they have repeated late payments of rent, that's also grounds
Yes.
for an eviction,
Yeah.
right? But it's how do you accept those later payments? If you say to them, it's all good, giving the money, the RTB is going to say, well, you accept late payments. That's not a repeated late payment, right? So there are little key niches. And so before you go and issue that notice, what we always say to clients, or I say is, come to me for your consultation. We charge for it, but we're going to look at all your documents. We're going to tell you what we think. And if we think there's an issue, we'll tell you.
Right.
If we think you have a case, this is how you should do it. And we give the client the option,
Yes.
right? We don't have to do everything. We can prepare you. You can do it yourself, but it's like you're trying to make it manageable.
Yeah, you're able to streamline the process. Okay,
Yeah.
Jas, do this.
Sure.
Because I am not an expert, and this is what happens is until I get personally involved into it, I didn't know that we can hire the lawyers too.
Yeah.
And I hired the lawyer for the reason because I was so busy.
Sure.
I didn't have the time to do all the application once more. I said, okay, I'm going to hire the lawyer
Yeah.
to do this for me.
Sure.
But point is people don't understand, and there's so many of my clients who have been out there facing this challenge. I know you, as you mentioned in the beginning, the lawyer is not, lawyers are not cheap. But if you look at the bigger picture, one of my client in South Surrey, he has a house. Tenants has been moved out. He got the order favor.
Sure.
Bailiff came in. Tenant has locked the house.
Right.
He's not answering the phone now. So bailiff is saying that you have to be, as an owner, pick up all the stuff of him, keep it in a storage for 30 days.
Yep.
And if he comes back, that's otherwise you paid for the storage, you paid
Yep.
to the bailiff. Why is it being so favorable towards tenants then? Why it is being that way?
You know, I guess like any law that you hate, you have to blame. You have to talk to the government,
Yes.
right? They're trying to provide them with protection. They're trying to ensure that landlords just don't throw all their stuff away. It's just again evolved over time. If they have goods there, if you look at the regulation of the Tenancy Act, that's where you get all these rules about maintaining the goods for certain days. If they're abandoning the unit, right?
Yeah.
There's provision about what does abandonment mean. But the idea is that because I guess whenever you look at a landlord-tenant relationship, who's the stronger party optically? It's the landlord.
Yeah.
They probably have more resources. They have the equity in the house or the property, right? The lesser party is the tenant.
Tenant.
And so I think when they're developing legislation, they're looking to balance those rights. And because the tenant is a lesser party, they kind of get the benefit of that balancing.
I feel like the person who was writing the legislation was a tenant at that time. So that's why he wrote it like that.
Yeah, but
because it's so much favorable. Like you can't do this, you can't go to your own house. Like it's saying it's a trespassing into your own house.
But governments listen to the ballot box.
Yeah.
Right. And so look at our current environment. The current government is making a lot of changes. They tend to benefit tenants.
Yeah.
Visually.
Yes.
But also, who is their base? Who's going to vote for them? Where is their power source coming from?
Yeah.
Right. So governments, the ballot box is one of the best ways to compel governments to do certain things.
Yes.
And it just so happens that in this case,
Yeah.
and it's across Canada. It's not like it's just here. Housing is a massive issue.
Huge.
And so people can't buy.
Yeah.
They can only rent, generally speaking.
Yes.
And so that's why they're the largest voice.
Voices, yeah, because they wanted to win the votes of those people.
Yeah.
They wanted to be in the good books of those
Yeah.
people. But in this whole process, the landlord is feeling the heat because the mortgage rates are high.
Yep.
Everything is so high. And on top of it, last thing you wanted, the tenant not paying you the rent. And even after okay, I was going to ask you one more thing is,
Sure.
let's say I'm the landlord.
Sure.
It has gone into my favor. We got the eviction notice. What happened to the money they owe us? Because I can't do anything with that money, to my understanding. And correct me if I'm wrong as a lawyer. What if we use your services? Can you protect that money also, which I lost it in the tenancy, or we can go after the tenant?
So when you go to the RTB, they're going to look at those as two separate issues,
Yes.
right? So you're going to say, landlord, you're asking for an order of possession. You're asking for
The
lost
rent.
rent. We're going to say, because the notice issue is the important one, we're going to dismiss the monetary request with leave to reapply. So you'll have to go back through the RTB process. You have to keep in mind that for a landlord, there's something called duty to mitigate.
Okay.
So that entire period, you have to do everything in your power to reduce your loss. Now, if you go back to the RTB and they look at all the documents, they say, well, landlord, we agree with you. You lost money.
Yeah.
We agree with you. You mitigated the loss to the best of your ability.
Right.
And if they agree with you overall, they'll issue you the monetary order. The problem is you now have to enforce the monetary order, right? And so you might have to go to court to say, hey, judge, I got the order. We want to get paid. Now, collections becomes the problem.
Yes.
And so they don't have to pay you everything. They
Right.
could pay you could go to something called a payment hearing, and the court's going to say to the tenant, so tenant, why can't you pay the money? And they're going to say, well, judge, I don't have $10,000 to pay them. Judge will say, well, how much do you have? And they can say, well, I could pay $10 a month. Right? So collections under the current legislation, the current law, is not the best. However, in a few years, there are going to be making changes to the law. So it's called the Monetary Judgment Enforcement Act. It's coming into force in a couple of years.
Right.
But that will give judgment creditors, like
Right.
the landlords, more power to enforce their judgments against debtors, like tenants, and have access to easier garnishment,
Yeah.
have access to actually seize some of their goods in a much
Yes.
more easier fashion. So it'll actually become far more quicker.
So is it going to be coming soon?
It's coming in a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That's
2025.
okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah, so
There's some light in the tunnel.
It's on the horizon. It's coming.
Yes.
It's just not here yet.
Not yet,
Yeah.
but that's a good news to know. Is and was it why we can't do it, or is it a law? That's why we couldn't do it as first versus commercial. We put up a personal guarantee as if I'm the tenant. Majority of the landlords, unless I have a huge corporation, a big
Yeah.
corporation, they're gonna want my personal guarantee.
Yeah.
So why don't we can't have the personal guarantee when we're giving it to the tenants? I know they don't have a house or the asset,
Yeah.
but they have the car, the vehicle.
Again, same thing. The Tenancy Act says you can't contract out of it. So if it is not required, you can't. So there are limitations on what you can do, and so it's not a requirement. Somebody could dispute that. It's a
Right.
requirement, and the last thing you want is to be on the wrong side of the law
Yeah.
in front of the RTB, right?
Okay.
Some people try to charge, for example, even the security deposit.
Yes.
I've heard people charging security deposits full value, but the Act says
15 days.
well, they say your rent is 4,000. The legislation says the security deposit is going to be 2,000, 50%.
Yeah, 50.
I've heard landlords try to get 100%,
Yeah.
but that's illegal,
That's illegal.
right? So it's just point of the personal guarantee.
Yes.
It's just not required.
Not
and I
required.
think if somebody disputed at the RTB, it would be a term of the contract that would be cancelled.
Okay. Now let's say I rented out a property to somebody, or there's a law I heard it like if somebody's going to be staying in the property for 3 months
Yeah.
without even any contract, it's automatically turned into as a tenant.
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? It's
Yes.
first of all, even if you don't have a written tenancy agreement,
Yes.
the Act says there's still a tenancy.
Okay, just one second
Yeah.
because I want to go back on
Yeah,
this one.
yeah, sure.
Okay, guys, just to understand also, and this is happening in real life too. I see my homeowners when they want to sell their properties. I said, okay, do you have a tenancy agreement? They said, no, we don't have a tenancy agreement. So in their head, they feel like they can ask the tenant to move out any day because there's no tenancy agreement. I said,
Yep.
which is not true.
Yep.
So now hear it from the right person. Why is it not true? What
Because
it
the
is.
Act says that there is a tenancy agreement, even if there's not even written, right? And those terms of that agreement are the legislation,
Okay.
right? So the default terms of any tenancy agreement are the legislation, right? So the right to quiet enjoyment,
Yes.
for example, that's in the legislation. That's a basic term, right? The RTB has their standard form contract, and all those terms come from the legislation. So, regardless of whether you have a written tenancy agreement or not, there's a tenancy agreement. But to
Okay.
your question is there a tenancy? If it looks like a duck,
Quacks
it walks
like
like
a
a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a
It's a
duck.
duck.
If it looks like a tenancy, acts like a tenancy, works like a tenancy, it's a tenancy. But that, you can dispute that at the RTB. It's a contextual exercise, but that's my basic,
Yeah.
4-part test.
So coming back to my own story,
Yeah.
the tenant moved out, original tenant moved out, B tenant came in. Will you call that also as a tenancy? Because I never rented out that property to him as a B. I rented to Anil. I didn't rent it to
Yep.
Am. Behind the cameras, Emmanuel, just guys to give you a perspective who's Am is. So Emmanuel is the person I'm talking about. Okay. Is it a tenancy then? Can't I evict him right away?
So a lawyer's best answer is it all depends, right?
Okay.
It's always context, and it's how the points are argued. I could say to you on its face, from what you've told me,
Yes.
and I want to preface everything I've said here today.
Yeah.
This is not legal advice.
Yes,
This is us having
100%,
conversation.
guys. Yeah, this is just a conversation, yes.
If you need legal advice, get a lawyer. But
yes.
that's me being risk adverse.
Yes.
I'd say to you, it seems to me that you never approved an assignment.
Never.
You never approved a sublease.
No.
And realistically, the person, tenant A left.
Yeah.
So I would say to you, is it a tenancy? Shouldn't be.
Yes.
But it's how does the other party argue it? What facts do they present?
So the other party only argued over the phone to the arbitrators that
Yeah.
say I paying the rent to the tenant A.
Yeah.
To me, he was the owner.
Yeah.
I didn't check the title. Who's the owner?
Yeah.
Jazz. Who's Jazz? I don't
Yeah.
know.
So
And then RTB said that okay, for this, either you talk to him personally, you mutually agree on the terms and conditions, or reapply for it. So in my head was at that time thinking it's going to take me another 6 months. So why don't I just mutually agree and said that okay, you being a tenant now, you don't want to move out. I asked him, do you want to move out or no? I want to stay.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the issues with tribunals generally, not just the RTB, is that the adjudicator, the judge, not always are lawyers.
Yeah.
Their training is not across the board consistent as you would hope. And so I can say to you, I have a case like yours,
Yes.
where the RTB said no tenancy. I've seen other cases where, kind of like yours,
Yeah.
it is a tenancy or it might be a tenancy. So go
Yes.
back and do it. So the problem with tribunals are, because there's no precedent, decisions you can rely on in the future. Every arbitrator is different. Every arbitrator looks at everything differently, and because they're not really bound by a prior decision,
Yeah.
it's always context specific. So I could say to you, I agree with you. It's probably not a tenancy proper, but it's how do they argue the case, what evidence do they provide, and which arbitrator do you have?
So would that have been a different scenario if I had a professional like you as a lawyer who's taking care of my case, and
I think
the outcome would have been different?
I think I would like to hope it would have been different.
Yes.
Remember, sometimes you have an arbitrator, you just can't change their mind because they see the world a different way.
Psychologically, it makes a difference to the arbitrator? There's the other side is the lawyer.
I
not
think they're
the-
listening a bit closer.
Yeah, because
Right.
they also have to be very watchful what they're going to
Right.
say. Right, or the rules, because you know that
Yeah.
rules and
Well,
regulations, the
yeah,
laws.
Exactly. Think about it, right? So you got a decision that you didn't like.
No.
Your options were, you could have had a review of the decision if there was something wrong about it, and there are limited grounds that you can argue for review internally of the RTB, right? So, for example, if there's an issue that the arbitrator should have addressed but didn't address, that's a reviewable ground,
Right.
right? So it would have gone back to the same arbitrator or maybe somebody else in the RTB to look at. If you still disagree, go to court. But going to court,
It's going to cost.
it's going to cost money. And so that's why you took the rational approach is say,
Yes.
well, I can either spend thousands of dollars going to court to fight a bad decision, only be back at square one,
Yeah.
or I got a tenant apparently who
Yes.
seems like a good guy
Yeah.
from what I know,
Yes.
and I'm going to try to make it work, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I tried to
Yeah.
do with there, because
And-
even with I know she sent me an email saying that you can dispute this, but the challenge for me was that even if I dispute it, it's going to take another 3-4 months
Yeah.
dispute and everything, and I
Yes.
will not be getting any rent. So,
Yeah.
but if I mutually agree with the tenant,
Yep.
I will at least get the rent from tomorrow.
Sure.
And unfortunately, I never got
Yeah,
a rent for that
it's-
house, but
y-
that's
you
what
know,
one of the cases like.
It's a business decision,
Yes.
right? I'm not an accountant, but I would say to you, well, you suffered a loss on your property. How does that affect your tax implications, etc.? So having a good accountant, having a good lawyer, two good
Yes.
people to have,
Yes.
and having a good
it's
estate
very
agent,
important. It's
right?
very important, and this is that I tell multiple times. I've said it in real estate too. Your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
Have a good lawyer.
Yeah.
Have a good accountant.
Sure.
Good realtor. Good mortgage person. Have your whole team is a core of your investments. If you are an investment, if you want to create your portfolio strong, you have to have your
100%.
back strong. Then those people will help you out.
Yeah.
And this is a very good connection building with you also, like which my hundreds of my clients can take advantage of it, who are watching too, and people who are working personally too. Because me definitely going to be working with Anil for simple reason is I'm busy. I don't have a time to do this, and I'm not expert in it. So let better expert handle it. Yes, in the hindsight, you feel like why we need a lawyer.
Yeah.
I would say my personal experience, leave it to them because it's going to eventually cost you more than you're going to be paying to the lawyer, and you will be saving your time. Time is money.
It really is.
It is money.
And so to that point, so if your clients are first time investors, for example,
Yes.
one of the best ways to learn really is to, sometimes you have to pay to learn. And so at the outset, having the right team, getting the lawyer to even explain basic things to you, the process to you, might save you in the long run
Yes.
a lot of money down the road.
Yeah.
Because you've already taken the time to spend money to understand how to do things.
Yeah. What are the pros and cons
Yeah.
will be, or what should you do
Yeah,
it
exactly.
in terms of if you wanted
You know,
to dispute it or
Exactly.
something?
Or also, for example, get a for a property, maybe get a property manager, right?
Yes.
They're licensed.
Yeah.
They have to follow protocol, and you can learn from them.
Yes.
Have them for a year.
Yeah.
See how they do things for a year. Learn from them. Take from them. If you don't need
But
them after a
Anil,
year,
with the property management too, I have a connections
Yeah,
with those two most of the time. Actually, matter of fact, I just posted one video also about a month ago where I said it is very important for people to hire a property management. Now I'm going to be making a video, another one, which is going to be for the lawyers, needs to be, because I made it in the saying that you paying 8% to 10%, depending on the property, it saves a lot of your hassle. They will do all the due diligence. But coming to the point where I was going to say that even with the property management, I have experienced my clients' properties and my own tenants have not paid the rent, and they got the bad tenants in there.
Sure.
So
Yeah, you're still stuck with the
yeah,
same
they are
problem.
not going to be like
Yeah.
it's not 100%
Yeah.
saved. Yes, to some extent it is saved
Yeah.
better than what you're doing it on
Sure.
your own going
Sure.
to be.
I guess, and so those are very certain circumstances. But say you have a multi-unit residence,
Yes.
you have tons of tenants, and some tenants make a lot of noise,
Yeah.
right? They do a lot of issues, and it affects other tenants. Well, then you're into another area of the act called quiet enjoyment. So tenants are allowed to have quiet enjoyment, and if you know that they're causing disruption, you have an obligation as a landlord to stop that breach of quiet enjoyment.
And how we can stop that then?
Well, and that's where the property manager can be assisting, or a lawyer, for example, writing letters, documenting what's happening, demanding compliance with the act, reducing the activities. And so again,
Can you evict them on that basis?
if they, so yeah, you can, right? If if quiet enjoyment is a term of a contract generally, that you have to, maintain this quiet enjoyment for others if you're in a building. And so with any breach of the act, I would say, the act says you have to give that person notice that of a potential issue and a reasonable opportunity to correct it. And if they fail to correct it, that could give grounds for an eviction for cause.
And interestingly, you mentioned about multifamily. I have few clients who are investors purchasing multifamily buildings through me. Is tenancy, this old building, you wanted the tenants to be moved out, they can remodel the building and put it in there. In that circumstances, what should they can do, or how could you come into the picture and help my clients or any in general people to help it?
So if you're buying multifamily and you want to make it better,
yeah,
and it's a total gut job where you have to renovate the entire property,
Yes.
you can't evict them until the RTB says you can evict them. And so that's a 4-month notice.
yes,
And so before you can even issue the 4-month notice, you have to meet a series of thresholds, right? You need to have permits in place, the plan. You have to show that you have to actually vacate the property to carry out these.
so when you say the premises, so you have to move out the tenant from the building to somewhere temporary.
It depends on how big the building is. So it can.
Let's say 25-year condos. Multifamily 25
Yeah, I don't
condos,
believe
right?
25. I think it's like 5 or less. You have to. But again, I know the city of Vancouver has their own tenant relocation plan. So again, it's very context specific.
Okay.
But it could be possible that you might have to actually pay for sometimes relocation expenses. And this is where having a lawyer. And I've got some friends, clients that I've talked about, and they're bigger developers in Vancouver, and they have the same issues, right?
Well, that's why I wanted to bring it, because you mentioned about it, because this is actually an issue with my clients also.
Yeah.
They have done it. They had the plan was that the A plan was to renovate, remodel the whole building,
Yep.
and then move into the tenants.
Yep.
But challenge coming is it was so difficult
Yeah.
to move the tenants out.
And I guess the idea sometimes is you want to increase the rent. That's part of the
Yes.
play, right? So that's one avenue. Recently, in the last 2 years, the government passed a new law that allows you to get rent increases above the annual increase. So every year you're permitted on a percentage
2%?
base, 2%.
Yes.
I think it's 3.5% this year,
Okay.
right? The government said if you undertake capital expenditures to a building, right, you can apply to the RTB to increase the rent above the annual increase.
And
So
how much is that going to be on?
So it depends on how the project
How
is.
much you put
So-
it in.
So yeah, say for example you have 50-unit building. The building envelope, for example, is end of its useful life.
Yeah.
It's going to cost you $2 million to replace it.
Right.
You fix the envelope, and you have 18 months from the date of the last check you paid for that expenditure
Right.
to go to the RTB and say, hey, RTB, I spent $2 million for this building envelope.
Yeah.
This is all my evidence. This is all the reasons why I did it. And I now want to increase my rent on the tenants above the annual rate.
Okay.
And so this is a venue, an avenue that allows you to get some additional monies that you might not otherwise get.
Oh, that's very good to know, because
Yeah.
I was under the impression that, okay, you can't do that because you cannot increase the rent, as only I was under the impression that 2 to 3% only you can
Yeah,
increase
so
it.
that's the guarantee, right?
Yes.
The annual is the guarantee. This is
So
a
tenant can
possibility.
oppose to that?
So they can they can oppose it. So I've done now a number of these, and so what happens is the building envelope, right? Often the building envelope is going to be 50 years old. If you look at the case law and the RTB's decisions, generally a building envelope has a useful life of about 25 years.
Yeah.
So at 50 years, you're already past useful life.
Yes.
It makes sense to want to replace it. Hopefully you'll be able to show that you maintained that building envelope reasonably, and it's just now the right time to
Right
replace
time
it.
to replace it.
So you have to present all the invoices, all the checks that you issued.
Right.
If there is a report that said it's time to replace it, you have to prove that the building envelope won't the repair won't reoccur in 5 years. Like interim maintenance is
Yes,
fine,
yeah.
but you're not going to replace the building envelope again in 5 years, right?
Yeah, which is obviously going to be, it's not going to be happening if
No.
the
Yeah.
intentions are right, that
Common
they're not
sense.
making it
Yeah.
up. Yeah, so it's
Com-
not that they're trying to fraud somebody
Yeah.
or making it, okay,
Yeah.
changing the building envelope.
Exactly.
It is going to be there. So
Yeah.
those things are
So
common going to
you
be.
put that out there to the RTB,
Yes.
you file it. You once you get the notice back, issue to your tenants.
Ballpark, what's the timeline?
They're doing it very quickly. I filed one, I know, in February. My hearing's in April.
Oh, nice. Okay,
So it's pretty
about
quick.
the
And then
2
30,
months.
30 days from there, right?
30
So about
days,
May.
you give it to the notice to the tenants.
Yeah.
And what happens if the tenant says, okay, I don't, you're not going to be paying the rent for this. So we can evict them then?
Well, if they don't pay the rent, then you can
Yes.
issue the notice,
Notice
right? After
to
you make
them.
your demands, you can definitely issue a notice if they're not paying rent. Yeah.
Yeah, not paying rent, and you can evict them.
Sure.
Or the other way was it the first, there's two options you could do it from the building. But in my position, if I say that, okay, I want to do inside also, this is not the building only, interior also, like cosmetic things going to be, kitchen going to be, aesthetics of the building inside.
Yeah.
So then we have to move the tenant out.
Well, yeah. So again, then you can look at the 4-month notice.
Yes.
And so you have to get all your ducks in a row, and issue that notice. Then the RTB will say yes or no, and once
Okay.
they say yes, then you can move them out.
What is there a certain guidelines they look into it, like a checklist? Okay, this 4 months
Yeah.
applicable, or
Yeah.
they have something just
Again, you have to look at like the legislation. It's like
Okay.
Section 49(6), I believe, of the
Okay.
Act, and it lists out all the bullet points of what you need to effectively achieve
Hmm.
to get there. I will tell you right now, and the first thing I tell every client is, before you talk to me, there's something called policy guidelines.
yeah.
Read the policy guidelines. They should tell you, again, they're designed with a critical reader, but they should give you an idea. But the lawyer helps you bring it all
Yes.
together, in my opinion.
Or in my opinion, is would be a good idea if somebody locks a property under the contract, comes to the lawyer, take the advice that this is my plan going to be, I'm going to be renovating it. So then in journal, like if they come to you, you could tell them, okay, yes, this is doable or this is not
Yeah,
doable
100%.
before you're committing to those $4 million, $5 million
Yeah,
properties.
for sure.
And then you feel like, okay, this is,
Yeah. The worst feeling is being stuck after a big purchase.
Yes.
Right? And not being able to what you want to do. When you come in, you're a landlord. You're their landlord on the prior agreement. You
Yeah.
can't change things, right?
Yes.
So you get stuck with a bad contract. Well, guess what? It's a bad feeling.
Yeah.
And so the idea is, and one of the good things about a lawyer is, when we get a file, it's sometimes a narrow issue, but what we're trying to also develop for our client is a broader strategy for their entire portfolio, so that
Yes.
they can utilize these concepts, these strategies across all their
Across the-
properties,
yes.
and then they can have a better
Yeah.
real estate portfolio.
No, 100%, because that helps it. Again, it comes to if you have a strong team
Yeah.
who can take care of those small litigated things in the back end, then you can perform better.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you feel the heat of it.
Yeah.
I've seen it, people
Well-
in this business making those mistakes.
Well, it's funny, right? So in your boardroom, you have that one poster of Warren Buffett.
Yes.
And it's like the best way to make money is to make money while you're sleeping. I
Well,
think,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so I think that's kind of having the good team around you. You're
exactly.
not sleeping, but
But
you're
your
not doing
team
the
is
work,
there, yeah.
and they're doing the work for you to make you
Exactly.
make more money.
Yeah, that's what
right?
it is. It says it like if you don't find a way to make money while you're sleeping, you're going to be working for the whole life.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So that's what the
Right.
quote is.
And so get the people.
Teamwork is a
Yeah.
teamwork. That's all it is. Going to,
100%.
right?
So get the team in place. Let them
Yes.
do the work for you, so that you don't have to.
No, amazing. This last thing before we wind it up there, is
Sure.
there any other things we should be as a landlord should look after it, or certain things as a tenant also? Something you want to say it before we end it up? Something we want to mention about it? We should be aware of as an investment.
So in terms of just dealing with tenants,
Yes.
a lot of people like to talk on the telephone or very informally.
Yes.
When it comes to your tenant, remember that they're your tenant. Document your conversations. Emails are best, because you don't want anyone to ever be able to say, well, that's not what they said. Always, when I look at an issue, it's all about the evidence. The evidence is all you have. So the moment you can anticipate an issue
Yeah.
or potential issue, always go to paper.
So would the communication through the emails also going to be acceptable, even though the contract says you have to hand deliver something? The tenancy contract, there's no option for the email communication.
So for the notice, so for certain documents like notice,
Yes.
or you have to go what the Act says, which are, for example, registered mail, door posting, etc. You can also have the tenant sign or ask them to sign the RTB form that permits email service. So that's a
Okay.
big one, especially in today's world where email is the
Yes.
best method. Have that tenant sign that. Ask them to sign
that.
one. It
Yeah,
makes
sign
them
that.
so much
because,
easier.
Yeah, when you're signing so it's a big tip for you guys over there, homeowners. If you are trying to rent it out the property for the tenancy board, make sure you have that point written. The communication can be done through the emails, because if you don't do it, it's not going to be acceptable in terms of when you wanted to get the eviction, and the tenant can say, hey, it's not written, I don't accept that email, so you have to give deliver. Sometimes it's challenging because they refuse to sign it.
Sure.
So let's say they refuse to sign it. Can I have a witness with me saying it that he refused to sign it? Will that
Yeah,
acceptable?
well, if he refused to sign it, then he refused to sign it, right? Like it, in
No,
terms
but
of
the landlord can make it up also saying that, okay, I went to the house, tenant never signed it. In reality, I never
have a
gave it
witness.
to that.
Yeah, have a witness.
Has a
have a
witness.
witness. Personally,
That witness can be landlord's friend too.
sure. Yeah, they're a
that
witness,
is
right?
acceptable.
Personally, that's why I like registered mail.
Yes, that's the safest way. Yes.
Safest way. Canada Post isn't.
Yeah, they're not gonna say that.
They're not lying, right?
Yes.
The tracking number is a tracking number.
Yeah.
Notice is a notice. There's no
way.
there's no blame. There's no suspicion. Nothing.
Okay.
So keep it simple. You always looking for a probability,
Yes.
right? You always want the highest probability outcome.
Right.
So if you're going to dispute notice, well, guess what? Canada Post can't dispute it.
Yes.
High probability.
Anil, I know I already said it. That's the last question, but I one more question I want to
For
ask.
sure.
I'm not going to take much of your time too. Here, I know you're a busy person, and we had Emmanuel also saying that the time is going off.
Fair enough.
So, anyways, I will wind up very quickly, but this is very important for it. We sell houses as a realtors. There's a eviction notice from the buyer side goes to the basement tenants.
Yep.
What if they don't move out at the time of completion? Who is responsible? Is it the seller or is the new buyer who has to take care of that hassle to move evict him?
How is the contract written, right?
Yes.
If the contract says that the buyer will deliver
Yes.
free and vacant possession, well, guess what? They're not delivering to you free and vacant possession of the house.
So won't that buyer says that or seller says that the notice has to deliver by you, so we delivered it. Our job was just to, because the tenancy act said the 49C something the clauses that the buyer has to give the notice that on a good faith saying I'm going to moving into this basement too, or my family member is going to move into it, and tenants don't move out. So can we make seller be responsible for that, even though?
So I think you have to craft your contract carefully.
Okay.
First of all, you have to anticipate you need 2 months.
Yes, for 2 full months.
Yeah. So
yes.
so even if you have subjects removed, when's your closing?
Yes.
If the closing is a 1 month and you got a 2 month, it's
Yes.
not happening.
Not happening.
So
No.
as a seller, as a seller's agent, you got to be cognizant that I can't deliver something which the
Yes.
law says I can't do.
Yeah.
Right.
No, let's say we go for the proper
Yeah,
rules,
yeah,
2 full months
yeah.
notice. Still on the date of completion,
Yeah.
can buyer make a responsible seller saying, hey, I deliver it, but they haven't moved out, so it's your responsibility as a seller to give me a vacant possession.
Yeah, I guess what you could say is, well, then it's a breach of the contract per se, but
Yeah.
that's money.
Yeah.
So you could say to the seller, well, you bargained for this, you didn't deliver this, so we can either do 2 things. We can either toss the deal,
Yeah.
or you give me some money back to compensate me for the loss, right?
Okay.
And so the hearing will eventually occur. They'll probably be kicked out if it's a valid, legitimate notice, and that's how you deal with it.
Yeah. So basically, in nutshell, is seller is not off the hook. Say that, oh, sorry, it's not my responsibility. I delivered the
But,
notice. They
yeah,
didn't move out.
and
He's
that's-
also liable.
And that's where you have a good agent like you,
Yes.
right? Who says, I recognize this is an issue. How do we craft the terms in our contract that protect my client
Yes.
against this kind of outcome?
Yeah.
And so if you're a seller's agent, you're going to say, well, we can't guarantee because the
Yeah,
tenancy
we
act's
don't
a
want
problem.
it to warrant
So
the
what
vacant
we agree
possession.
to is we're going to issue the notice on your behalf.
That's most of the time I do it
Yeah.
as a seller side.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
I say that, there's a clause that the seller warrants a vacant possession. I always cross it off.
Yeah.
We cannot warrant.
No.
If the tenant's not moving out, I don't want my seller to be
Yeah.
obligated for
Right?
that.
You're trying to avoid problems.
Yes,
Right?
we have to avoid
like,
problems.
As you're a professional like me,
Yes.
our job is to take issues off your hands.
100%.
And so, by doing that, that's
Yeah.
the best you can do for them.
No, appreciate it all. Thank you, Anil, for coming
you.
again from Vancouver
Yeah, no
and
worries.
sharing all your expertise, information about to my viewers. So throw the comments, guys. This is for the podcast. If you like it, what you didn't like it, again for the tenants also. If they're watching it, I'm not against the tenants. By all means, same here.
There you
Anil
go.
is not. We just trying to give the information. Not all the tenants are bad here, and same thing. Not all the landlords are greedy. They want increasing the rent for no reason.
Tenants are going to become future landlords. You never
Yeah,
know, right?
Always.
So
I always say that my best clients are the tenants because they're going to be one-time future
Yep.
owners of the houses. So
fair
on that note, take care, guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
See you next time.